There's a wonderful story about this kingdom. It was the realm of light where the river Om merged into the cosmic sea. And King Darshan was getting old in his years, and he wanted to spend his last remaining years just in contemplation of God. And he told all the people in his kingdom that he was going to make a big announcement in 3 days. Well, people in the kingdom were very excited because King Darshan was always a very generous king, and people came thinking, well, maybe we could get something from the king. And so everybody came, everyone. Happened to be a little beautiful little 7-year-old girl named Elizabeth. She came too, and she was in the habit of sitting next to King Darshan whenever there was an event, and she would just sit quietly right next to him. And so she was there, and King Darshan, he said that God has spoken to me, and it's time for me to renounce the wealth of my kingdom, and I'd like to share it with all of you. Well, immediately everyone in the kingdom, in the room in the presence of the king was so excited. And they started running even before he was done with his announcement. And some ran for the crown jewels, and others ran for the very priceless paintings. And people were carrying out as much as they could out of the palace. And the only one that wasn't moving was Elizabeth, and she just stayed there by the king, not moving at all. And eventually, it was only the king and Elizabeth left in the palace, and everything else was gone. Well, the people enjoyed their new acquisitions for a while, but after a while, some of them broke, some of them were stolen, or some of them became old hat, and their lives just returned to the way their lives were before. But Elizabeth, she just sat by the king, and he asked her, "What do you want, my child?" And Elizabeth stood up, and she walked over to the king, and she reached out with her hands like this, and the king reached out with his hands, and she said, "I want you." And what she received from the king was a deep inner blessing. And he smiled, the king smiled, and he passed on a lot of his spiritual magnetism to Elizabeth, because that's the secret of creation, that God has put us in this world to see if we're satisfied with things, material things that don't really express our true nature and the nature of God. And we can get by and that, but we're just sort of half asleep, or maybe even a tenth asleep. But when we wake up and we realize that true fulfillment doesn't come through things, but only in the presence of God, then God can reveal himself to us, because we have the purity of heart to receive him fully into our lives. And at that moment, that's when we really begin to see God not only in ourselves, but God everywhere, in everyone. And as we can do that, we truly will be able to live in the consciousness of God and to share the consciousness of God with everyone.